What happens when the Lord of the wilderness comes to us bearing eternity on his back? What happens when the most innocent part of ourselves wants to run off with the huskiest, snarliest thing she can find? I'm Jay Leeming, and this is the Crane Bag Podcast. Today we're going to explore this territory, explore it through the story of Valemon, the White Bear King. Thank you for joining me. Let us begin. Once there was a wild and beautiful forest, and in the center of this forest there was a castle, and in the castle there lived a king and a queen and their 3 daughters. And one night the youngest daughter had a dream. And she dreamed of a golden wreath, golden leaves and golden branches intertwined, spiraling in a beautiful, beautiful circular shape there. A wreath sparkling, all the joy and the delight of summer seemed to be inside this wreath. It was marvelous and amazing. She woke up with the golden light of this wreath all through her body, happy in her heart, but she didn't quite know why. And she went to her parents, the king and the queen, and she told them about her dream. And she said, "Father, does such a wreath as that exist in the world?" And he said, "Oh, most definitely, my dear. Yes, definitely. We can make you a wreath like that." And so he called for the royal craftsmen. And they came, and he demanded that they make a wreath as beautiful as the one in her dream. And not only as beautiful, he demanded they make the wreath in her dream. So they went off to their workshop, and they began to hammer and to pound metal into shapes, for they had studied leaves and branches before. They worked hard. They listened to the words she said about her dream, and they worked to make a wreath just like the one in the dream. Well, a few days later, their work was done. They went to the throne room, and so did the youngest daughter. And they presented the wreath to her. And the king and queen said, "There, my dear daughter, is this the wreath in your dream?" And she looked at that wreath, and she said, "Well, this is a nice wreath. I mean, this is a good wreath, yeah, but it's not quite the same, you know. The one I dreamed of was a little different. There was more elm leaves, I think, than oak. Elm on this side, oak on the other. Maybe a few acorns, I think. Well, back to the crafts room with you. Back to the workshop with you," said the king. "I want you to make a wreath just like the one in her dream." And so the craftsmen went off to their workshop, and they hammered and they pounded once again. Days went by. They labored, trying to make a wreath just like the one in the dream of the youngest daughter of the king and queen. After a few days, they came to the throne room, and they showed the wreath to her, and once again she looked, and the king said, "Is this your dream wreath? It must be. This must be the wreath in your dream." And she looked, and she said, "Well, I mean, it's a good wreath. It's nice. It's very nice. Yeah, elegant even. But I don't know, my dream was different. The wreath was a little different, a little more oval-shaped, I think, than circular, actually. Elm on this side, but they were twisted in a very cool way. Can you make that?" Well, the king sent them back to the workshop, and they worked once again. And time passed as time does. The river of time flowed forward, and a few days later, the youngest daughter, the princess, decided to go wandering. She left the castle and went outside. Outside this castle there was a field of grass, and then the forest began. She had wandered there before. She had grown up in that castle, and she had even wandered in the forest some. But now she went a little further than she had before, into the shadowy places of that forest. Further in she went, remembering always the golden wreath she had seen in her dream. And then she came to a thicket of branches and ferns. There was a fallen-over tree there, and on the other side of this thicket she heard a sound, a rustling, a thunderous rustling. "What is that?" she asked herself. "What is that?" And she went closer towards it. She went through the thicket, over the dead tree, and she stepped into a clearing in the forest. And there, in the long grass, was a great white bear, lying on his back, and he was tossing a golden wreath up into the air and catching it, and tossing it up into the air and catching it again. The youngest daughter looked at this scene, looked at the white bear and the wreath, spellbound. That golden wreath was exactly like the one in her dream. And then a moment later, the bear smelled her, and rolled up onto his paws and tossed the wreath onto his back, and carefully, quietly he came towards the princess. "Hello, princess," he said. "Hello, bear," she said. "How much," she said, "would you like for that wreath? My parents, they are a king and a queen. They have a lot of money. Is there anything I can give you? What can I pay to have that wreath?" And the bear said, "Oh, this wreath isn't for sale. No, I'm not interested in money. No money will get you this wreath. But there is one thing you could give me in exchange for this wreath." "What is that?" she said. And the bear said, "You. If you agree to marry me, this wreath shall be yours." "Oh, I would happily agree to that," she said. "Happily so." "Wonderful," said the bear. "I will come to get you next week. On Thursday I will come to fetch you from the castle." "Wonderful," she said. And the bear turned and walked powerfully and quietly away into the forest and was gone. And the youngest daughter went back to the castle, in something of a dream from all of these things she'd seen, the white bear and the golden wreath. But she went to the throne room, and she spoke to her parents, the king and the queen. "Dear mother, dear father, I have seen a white bear playing in the forest with a golden wreath that was exactly like the one in my dream. And I spoke to this bear, and he said that I could have the wreath if I agreed to marry him. So I agreed, and he is going to come next Thursday to get me from the castle." Well, what do you suppose her parents said? Did they say, "That's wonderful, that's great, we've always wanted you to marry a bear"? No, not indeed. The king said, "That's ridiculous! Marry a bear? No, you can't marry a bear. Humans are humans, and bears are bears. They do not mix. They do not get married." "Yeah, but humans are animals too," she said. No, you do not marry this bear." And she went off to her room, somewhat disconsolately, sadly, but filled with the dream she had had and with the vision of the white bear in the field, and consoled somewhat by that image. Well, time passed. The days went by. Sunday passed, and the day of the moon passed, and Tuesday and Wednesday passed, and then Thursday came, that stormy day. But on this day it was not stormy, actually. Actually, that morning there was mist in the field around the castle. And the king had taken precautions. He had assembled all the royal hunters, and he had told them to make a circle around the castle. So they were there, men who knew the forest well, who knew wild things well, and they had spears, and they had bows, and they had arrows. And they muttered among themselves, "Would this bear come? Would a bear really come to get the youngest daughter? No. Bears don't do that sort of thing. No. But then, suddenly, they looked, and at the edge of the field, without any fuss, without any great roaring, there was the bear, the white bear, beside a tree. He was looking at them, studying them. What was he going to do? And then the bear began to walk. Carefully and powerfully, with great purpose, he walked across the field. And the hunters tightened their grips on their spears and their bows and arrows, and they came hiding this way, lurking that way, and sometimes full affront they came towards that bear, and they let their spears loose, and the bear gave a great roar. "Roar!" he said, and he knocked 3 hunters this way, and 3 hunters to the other side, and the spears hit him, but they did no damage, for his skin was very tough, and he dashed this way. He was very fast for such a large animal. This way he knocked 4 more hunters into the moat, and then he came to the great gate of that castle, and he said, "I am Valemon, the white bear king. I am here for the youngest daughter." And the guards went rushing up to the throne room and told the king and queen what has happened. And the king said, "Well, all right, let's send the eldest daughter. My eldest daughter." He called her to him, and he said, "My eldest daughter, go down. There's a bear down there. I want you to go with this bear, but don't stay with the bear. Bring a knife and jump off his back or something, or kill him if you get a chance, but don't go with this bear." "Yes, father," she said. So the eldest daughter in a white dress went down to the gate of the castle, and she said, "Hello, bear." And the bear said, "Hello, my dear." And she got onto his back, and the bear turned and galloped off into the forest. Now the bear was very fast. So soon enough they were past that field, and they were into the depths of the forest. And the trees flashed past them. And then the bear began to speak, and the bear said, "My dear, have you ever sat as softly as you were sitting now?" And she said, oh yes, there's a chair in the castle. Yes, it's my mother's favorite chair. It's very soft." I see. "My dear, have you ever seen more clearly than you are seeing now?" And she said, oh yes, my father's castle has a great tower. I've been in the top of that tower. I've looked far off, and I've seen many things, mountains far away. You can see to the edge of the world there. And the bear said, "Rawr, you're not it." And he threw her from his back and into some muddy bushes there, and he disappeared into the forest and was gone. Well, she was a bit shaken up, and she was covered in mud now, but she wasn't hurt too badly. And she stood up, and she walked back through the forest to the castle. And she got there, and she told the king and queen about what had happened. Well, time went on. The days came one after the other, like birds flying out of some great storm at the center of all things. The days came, and they blossomed, and they slept at night. There was darkness over the world, and then a new day came once again. And once again, Thursday came. And once again there was mist on the grasses, but the king had taken even more precautions this time. This time they were all the royal hunters, plus one troop of soldiers were out there, and they had larger spears and more bows and more arrows. In the morning air there were birds singing far off. The mist was rising from the grasses. The sun was rising as well. And the hunters spoke with the soldiers. "He came last week. Is he going to come again?" "I don't know. Probably. I mean, he got through us, but we gave him a good scare last week. I don't think he's coming. Would a bear really come? Would he really come?" And as they were talking, they looked, and they saw a tree. They saw the grass. They saw the mist. There was a cloud, and then there was the bear. Just silently, he just appeared out of nowhere. There he was at the edge of the field. What was he going to do? They held on to their spears. They began to move around, the hunters and the soldiers. Which way would he go? What would he do? And then there was a great roar from the bear. "Rawr!" And he checked, and he threw hunters this way, and he threw soldiers that way, and he knocked them down, and there were spears and arrows flying towards him, but they did no use. They did no hurt to him at all. They did not pierce his skin. And he went "Rawr!" again, and across the grasses, creeping suddenly fast, he went to the gate of the castle, and he said, "I am the White Bear, King Valemon, and I am here for the princess, the youngest princess." And the guards hurried upstairs, and they told the king and queen what had happened. And the king quickly summoned his middle daughter. "Come, my daughter, come. The bear is here. You must go down there. You must go with him. We've got to solve this somehow. But take a knife with you or something and jump from his back if you can, or kill him if you get the chance. But don't go with this bear. But, just get him out of here." "All right, father, all right." So the middle daughter went down to the gate of the castle, and there was the bear. "Hello, princess," he said. "Hello, bear," she said. And she got on his back, and the bear turned, and he galloped away into the forest. And once again, the trees flashed past them, and they went deep into that forest. And then the bear began to speak, and he said, "My dear, have you ever sat as softly as you are sitting now?" And she said, "Yes, indeed. Oh, yeah. My mom has a chair with some pillows on it. Oh, it's a lovely chair. It's very soft." "I see," said the bear. "And have you ever seen as clearly as you were seeing now?" And she said, "Oh, yes. My father has a great tower in his castle. I have sat in the top of that tower, and I swear you can see so far. You can even see the ocean far off." And the bear said, "Rawr!" And he threw her from his back and down into some brambles, and he vanished away into the forest, and he was gone. Well, her white dress was covered in brambles and thistles, and she was a little shaken up and bruised, but she wasn't hurt too badly. And she stood up, and she walked out of that forest, and back to the field, and back to the castle. And she told her parents, the king and the queen, about what had happened. Well, time went forward as time does. The wild raccoon of time gnawing on the days as it does. Each day had its brightness and its shadow, had its light, had its dark, and the stars came out at night, and everyone slept, and everyone dreamed, and then the day came again, the victorious, beautiful day. And soon enough, Thursday came again. And this time the king had taken even more precautions. He had the hunters out there. He had 6 different troops of soldiers out there. They had catapults with them. They had all kinds of things. And they were ordered, keep the bear out, keep the bear out. So, in the early morning light, they were all there, the hunters and the soldiers. The catapults were all set up. Their spears were sharp, and their swords were as well. And they waited and they talked amongst themselves. Would the bear come? Would he come? Would he show up? Is it possible? Will that ice sheet down there on the South Pole, will it break up? No, it won't break up. Will the fire jump the road and gallop towards our houses? No, that won't happen. No. No, the hurricane won't come. It'll stay out at sea. It won't be as bad as they say. It will do what we want it to do. Nothing surprising will happen. That bear, he won't come. No, he's smart enough. He will stay away. And they talked like this, as the birds twittered in the branches of the trees, as the sun rose, and then they looked far off, and there was a tree, there was some grasses, there was a little stone, and there was a bear, as if he had always been there, as if he owned that place. He was there, silent, beautiful, his white fur seen there in the sunlight of the morning days, the morning moment, and he came across the grass quietly, silently, powerfully, walking towards them, and their hands tightened around their spears, and they got the catapults ready, and then with a great roar, the bear approached. "Roar!" he said, and he knocked 3 men this way and 4 men that way, and the spears went flying and the swords, but they did not do damage to that bear at all. And he dashed this way. There was a hidden gully there they'd never seen. They couldn't see him. Where was he? He went over here. He turned over the catapult. He knocked 5 men this way. 1 man had a broken leg. Another had a broken arm. Then he leaped over across the moat, and he was at the gate in a flash, and he said, "I am the White Bear King, Valemon, and I am here for the youngest daughter." And the 2 guards went running up to the throne room, and they told the king and the queen the situation, and how the bear had come to that gate. And the king relented, and he said, "We must give him our youngest daughter. We have no choice." And so he summoned his youngest daughter, and she, dressed in a white dress, went down the stairs to the gate of the castle. And she said, "Hello, bear." And the bear said, "Hello, princess." And she got on his back, and the bear turned, and he galloped off into the forest. Well, he was fast once again, and the trees flashed by. And once again the bear began to speak, and he said, "My dear, have you ever sat as softly as you are sitting now?" And she said, "No, I never have." And he said, "My dear, have you ever seen as clearly as you are seeing now?" And she said, "No, I never have." And so the 2 of them ran off into the forest. The youngest daughter, the princess, on the back of the white bear, and the white bear moving powerfully and quickly like a river of beautiful fur through that forest. And time passed. Perhaps years went by. Perhaps it was only moments. Perhaps it was days that felt like years. Perhaps it was years that were like acorns from a great tree made of eternity. They went flashing through that forest. And then they came to a place of many boulders. They came to some hills. They came to a forest of oak trees. And in that place, there was a great castle. And it was the castle of the Bear King. And it had boulders around it and oak trees. It was a beautiful place. A fierce castle was there. It had like spikes on this side and timbers this way and many levels and secret caverns. It was a lair, and it was a palace, and it was a fortress, and it was a castle. And the bear stopped there, and he said, "I am Valemon, the White Bear King, and this is my castle, and it is now your castle also." And the 2 of them went inside. And he said, "Be welcome here. I wish you to feel at home here. Everyone will take care of you here." And it was true. There were servants there who brought her things if she wanted them, water, food, anything she wanted. And the place was very beautiful. There were large statues of strange things, gods she'd never known about, and rivers. There were statues of rivers, and there were fountains, and a library filled with books with strange titles and atlases of the next world and of the dead lands and the live lands and beautiful things. There was a garden there, a garden with oak trees in it and pear trees and apple trees as well. Beautiful things were in this castle. So she explored that castle during the day. And at night the two of them retired to a beautiful, large bedroom. And there was a bed there, like a thunderstorm itself. And she got into bed with the white bear king Valemon. It was like sleeping beside a great mountain of white fur and warmth. A beautiful thing to snuggle up against, that hairy mountainous bear right there. So every night she slept in that bedroom with the white bear, and by day she explored the castle. But a few nights later, something happened. In the night, she was half awake, and she noticed something. Beside her, in the bed, there was not a bear, but a human, a man. There was a man sleeping beside her in the bed. She wondered about this. Was she dreaming? And then she fell back asleep. In the morning, in the day, there was the white bear king Valemon, and he was definitely a bear. Days went by, and then another night came, and it was the same way. She half awoke in the night, and she found there was a human there. A human man was beside her in the bed. She wondered about this, but she didn't ask any questions. So time went by. Days became weeks, became months, and the moons of the year came rolling through the sky, shedding their light down upon the mushrooms and the pine trees and the ferns, and giving to the earth the glad ancient song of its light. It spilled down at midnight and all through the darkness and the dark hours. And before long she became pregnant, and she in fact gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. But the strangest thing happened. The night after the girl was born, the baby just disappeared. It was magical, just whisked away on a strange, secret and dark wind. Somehow the child was no longer there. Well, she wondered about this, but no one answered her questions about it. No one seemed to know. They all seemed to accept that this was simply the way things were. So she felt very sad, and sorrow flooded her life for a time, and she would walk sadly through the palace garden, looking at the ground, thinking about darkness and about the seeds in the dirt, and how some of them flourish and how some of them wither away and never blossom. So these were sad days, but eventually she recovered, and life seemed to go on. The white bear king Valemon, he was very kind to her. He provided for her everything she needed. Often he went away into the forest, but he always came back. And the palace was a beautiful place. There were secret levels and floors. There were towers she had yet to discover. And she explored this place, and it was a distraction, and a beautiful one at that. But some time later, about a year later, she again gave birth to a baby girl. And again, in the night, a strange, secret wind came and whisked that child away. And she never saw that child again. And again sorrow flooded her life, and again she walked in the palace garden, and again she saw the leaves crunching under her feet, and she thought about what dies and what lives, and what the difference is between them, and why some things get to flourish and sing their mad songs into the April air, and some things simply quiver and die and are silent and are never heard from again. So ashes began to settle into her soul. But time went on, and the castle was beautiful, and the white bear king Valemon was very generous and very kind. And then this happened a third time. She gave birth to a third baby girl. And this girl as well was whisked away, and she never saw that child again. And her days filled with rain even when it was not raining, and they filled with sad, sorrowful songs, and bats' wings and crows' feathers seemed to be around her. And she was sad for a long time. And now she really had the sense that things were not right in that castle. It was a beautiful castle, a beautiful palace, and the white bear king Valemon was very kind. and there was delicious food of all kinds. There were songs sung in that place by the servants, amazing things. But somehow things were not quite right. And so one day she went to the White Bear King Valemon, and she said, "Oh, my dear bear, I long very much to see my dear family once again. I feel it is time for me to go and visit them, and see my dear sisters and my parents as well." "Well, if you wish to go, if your heart truly desires this, I will not stop you," he said. "But I will give you some advice. When you are there, listen to what your father says, but don't do anything your mother tells you to do." "Very well," she said. Well, soon enough, a magical chariot appeared before the castle, 2 white horses, and she got into that chariot, and away it went through the forest. It went this way and that, through the flashing trees. Off it went, past the boulders, past the moss on the stones. And as she went, everything became a wild blur. And she thought of her life there in that castle. And she thought of her life growing up in the great house and palace of her parents. And she wondered how these 2 things were combined, how they were mingled, how they could possibly become one song. And then, at twilight, she arrived at the castle of her parents. And she went into that castle, and her dear sisters and her mother and father were glad to see her, and they embraced her and cried tears of joy. And they asked her questions, and she told them everything she knew about the White Bear King Valemon and his great castle. And she told them what it was like in that castle. And they had many questions. Yes, you can imagine they had many questions. How does it work in there? What's it like living with a bear? Is there hair all over the place? Does he brush his teeth? What does he eat? Where does he sleep? How does this work? And she told them everything she knew. And she even told them how sometimes at night she woke up and it seemed that there was a human beside her in the bed, a human man, and how she could not understand what was going on exactly, what was happening, but how it might be just a dream. Well, after a while, she was talking to her parents, particularly the king and the queen, and they listened to all she said. And then the queen spoke and said, "My dear daughter, I have some advice for you. There is something funny going on at that castle, something fishy, something is not right over there. I say this, take a candle," and she pulled a candle from her cloak. "Take this candle and bring it back to the castle of the White Bear King Valemon. At night, when you awake, light this candle, and by that light take a good look at whoever is sleeping in that bed. See who it is. Is it Valemon, the Bear King, or is it someone else? Is he under a spell? Is he half bear and half human? What's going on there? Perhaps he doesn't have your best interests at heart. That's what I say. So light this candle and just see what's going on there." And the king said, "I don't know about that. I think things are going all right. Just let things go as they are, and the problem will solve itself." Well, the princess did not know what to do. She did not know what to do. But a few days later, when she left that castle, she brought that candle with her in her pocket. So once again, she left the castle of her birth. And that chariot took her across the grass and into the forest. And the trees flashed by, the trees filled up with old winters and old summers inside them, the trees that remember so much of the history of this earth. And the stones with their deeper memories were there as well, stones remembering fires at the beginning of the world. And as she went, she remembered that golden wreath, and she thought of the White Bear King Valemon, and she thought of the castle where she grew up, and she wondered again how these 2 places could be combined, wound together into a single thread. Well, at twilight she arrived at that castle, and the White Bear King Valemon was there to greet her, and he was very glad to see her again. And she was welcomed to that castle, and the servants gave her some delicious food, and the castle was as beautiful as it had always been. And they spent a happy time together wandering through that castle and in the palace garden, she and the Bear King. And at night they retired to the royal bedroom, to that bed that was like a great thunderstorm itself. And she got into that bed, and so did the white bear king Valemon, the great shaggy, hairy, beautiful, silky, mountainous, warm thing that he was there inside the bed, snuffling and breathing, and soon he was asleep. And soon the princess was asleep as well. But in the middle of the night, she awoke. She woke up. Her eyes opened in the darkness. The room was there, and she felt beside her, and indeed there was a human man beside her in the bed. Aha, she thought, and she remembered the candle her mother had given her. And she hesitated for a moment, but only a moment. And she got out of that bed, and she went to her bag, and she took the candle out, and she lit that candle. And carefully, she brought it to the bed. She looked at the bottom of the bed. There were the man's feet. They were human feet, quite certainly. She moved the candle up. She saw his knees, she saw his legs, she saw his hips, she saw his belly as well. All of these things were human. He was a human man, most definitely. She looked at his shoulders, at his arms, his powerful arms, his fingers. She looked at his neck, she looked at his chin. There was his face, the sleeping face of a human man, his eyes closed, dreaming perhaps, so peaceful as sleepers are when they sleep. She gazed at him for a while, and then, as she gazed, one drop of wax fell from that candle and onto his cheek, and he awoke. What are you doing? What are you doing? He said. Oh, 3 more days. Just 3 more days, and the spell would have been broken. I would have been human forever. But now you've ruined everything. You've botched all of this, and now I must go off to marry the troll hag queen on the glass mountain. You've ruined everything. And as he spoke, hairs began to sprout from his shoulders, white hairs, and from his chest and his arms, and his fingernails became great claws, and his eyes became bare eyes, and he had a snout, and he roared, and he left that bedroom and went down the stairs. Bear, she said, bear, stop. And he said, rah, and he went down the stairs, and she ran after him. But there was a balcony above the front gate. She went, without thinking, she went to that balcony. There was darkness all around. The moonlight was plunging down, and without a thought, she jumped from that balcony down, and she landed on the back of the White Bear King. And he went galloping off into the forest. Fast he was. This was a different ride than the ride from the castle of her parents. She hung onto his fur as tightly as she could, but he roared and he snarled and he went this way and that way, and he gave a great shake, and she was thrown from his back, and she landed on the hard ground with a bruise, and she looked up and she saw the White Bear King galloping away, vanishing further away, further, and he was gone into the darkness of the forest. But she was not hurt too badly. She picked herself up. What had happened? What had happened? Was it all a dream? Where was she standing now? What land, what world was she in? What had she done? What had she done? The moonlight trickled down between the trees. She looked on the ground, and she saw the great print of a bear's paw. And then just ahead of it she saw another great print from a bear's paw. She put her feet into these paws, and then, in the moonlight, she began to walk. I say